I adored sports. When I first went to school, I didn't know a word of English. I was born here, but I had to speak Greek in the house. By the time I got to 5th grade, I was pretty good in English. And the teacher said, today we're going to go and play indoor baseball. She says, put your coats on because it's a little chilly. So I'm saying to myself, I think I misunderstood her. So I said to my girlfriend that was standing next to me, I thought it was indoor. She says, that means softball. Indoor baseball means softball. Back in the 1940s, that's what it was called. So we went outside, and the first couple times that I got up to play, I hit a home run. So, of course, I liked all the attention that I got, all the boys, oh, you got to be on my team next time, so that's what happened. I was one of 2 girls that were allowed to play with the boys on the boys' team at the school. After school and during school, we had you have your gym, we didn't. We had outdoors, So the more I got to play, the more I got to love it. And I ate, slept, and drank baseball. I loved baseball. I played baseball until I was almost 18. And we were called the Jackson Heights Chicks. So we used to get a lot of kidding, chick, 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 all the time, because we played against boys' teams originally. And I have to say that we beat them. And I have clippings stating that. And then later on, around 1952, we started in a women's league that played in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. And they were Amazons. They were like in their 20s. Some of them had their children yelling and screaming, "Yay, mommy!" And we were just 16, 17 years old, So we were beaten. We were beaten to death by these women. And but it was fun, and you got to meet other people from different places, Connecticut, New Jersey. And these women really loved the game just as we did. Yeah. And our uniforms were given to us by our sponsors, who were a crew on a ship. And one of the girls on the team, one of the captains, I was the other one, her father was the one that got these crewmen to chip in and buy us uniforms, bats and balls, gloves. And for that reason, we couldn't play in amateur games anymore. We had to play in semi-pro. We weren't paid for playing, but they paid for our uniforms and what have you. Yeah.
In 1983, I had an opportunity to go to Israel with my synagogue and the rabbi, and I had such a lovely time. This is 1983, and the country is absolutely beautiful. And then I heard about this program, Volunteers for Israel. In the spring, or actually it was February of '84, that I was able to go to Israel as a volunteer. Now that means I would have to go into the army for 3 weeks. And my husband and my kids were willing for me to go because I was kind of pesty at home, because I was home. And
what do you mean you were pesty?
In other words, I set rules, and they had to do this, and they had to do that, and so I would never go away for that long unless I had the approval of my family. And my husband says, "Yes, you can go." My kid says, "Yes, Ma, go." So I went, and I had an absolutely marvelous time. I went into their army, and I was put on not a submarine base, a tank base down in the south in Beersheba. And I rode in a tank. They took those who wanted to ride in a tank to ride in a tank. And at that time, my legs were good, and I jumped into the truck to help them load stuff in the truck and take things out. I was really one of the guys. But it was fun. It was fun. There was one episode that was very, very funny. We were stationed in Camp Natan in right outside of Beersheba. And the sergeant of our unit said, let's go into town and get falafel. Now, falafel is pita bread with fried chickpeas put into the pita pocket, and then you put stuff on it. And when we were in Israel the year before, my husband loved it, and I had some, and it was really very good. So we went into, there was a stand in Beersheba, so we were 40 Americans all dressed up in Israeli uniforms, and we were walking, and we were talking English, and we were in town, and the people are looking and says, what is going on? Have we been taken over? Because who spoke English in the army? Well, they did speak English, but not to themselves. Yeah, to us they spoke English. They all spoke English to us, but not to themselves. So we made quite a scene when we went into town speaking English. But then we got to the falafel stand, and I had my falafel, and I didn't know any better. I had, I thought what I thought was tomato sauce. Was really no. I put it on and with vegetables and all. And then when I took one bite, I thought I was on fire. It was such hot sauce, and no one told me.
Why would you think?
Because I did. Because I come from America, and I thought it was tomato sauce. And that was a damper on that day. My mouth was was hot the whole time we were there. We were there a couple of hours, but it was an experience I will never repeat, because I will never. I will from now on ask what things are.
Tomato sauce?
That's right. It looked like I would get at home. I didn't think it was hot sauce. I didn't. No one told me. Afterwards, they said, that's hot sauce. I says, now I know, because my mouth is on fire.
Thanks for telling me now.
That's right.
When I first moved here, we lived on South Coleman Road, and across the street is now where Suffolk Community College currently is. And actually behind where Suffolk Community College is now, there was a tuberculosis sanitarium. So they had these beautiful pine trees. It was just gorgeous. But there was a chicken farm across the street from where I lived. And Mr. Schneider had his chicken farm, and we had fresh eggs and fresh chickens, and it was really great. There weren't a lot of houses on the road at the time. There was one other house that had a girl that was a couple years older than I was, and we could play together. And that was really it. There was a couple summer houses, a few regular houses, not a lot. Middle Country Road was 2 lanes. And so you had Middle Country Road that was 2 lanes, and you had our road, South Coleman Road, and then that went all the way to Horseblock Road, and there was no Nichols Road at all. So we were kind of annoyed when Nichols Road came in, because it actually went through our backyard, and it took a lot of woods away. We had a very deep backyard. But then I was probably, I don't know, maybe 10. And so what happened is when they were building it, it got to be our playground. There were no cars there, but you could ride your bikes and you could roller skate and you could do all kinds of fun stuff before they opened Nichols Road. And then we were kind of disappointed when it actually opened to traffic. We couldn't do all those things anymore. There was one phone in the house. And when we first moved in, have you ever heard of something called a party line?
Yeah.
Okay. So this,
like multiple lines connected to one.
well, it was multiple families that were on the same phone line. So if you picked up your phone and somebody was talking, you couldn't dial out or call until they hung up. And if they were on a really long time, then you'd pick up the phone and say, excuse me, how much longer will you be on, because I need to make a call. So you were really sharing, you're laughing, you were really sharing one phone line with other neighbors. So that was the first thing. And that one phone was usually in most people's house in the kitchen or the living room. As I got a little bit older and I wanted some privacy, I would take the whole phone with a great big long cord and sit in the hall closet, because that's the only place with the coats and the camphor balls and all that stuff. It's the only place you had, and I'd have to open the door every now and then to get some fresh air. And then I would get yelled at because I was on the phone too long.
Okay, when I moved out here in 1969, December of 69, the expressway ended at exit 60. So there was no Nichols Road. That was non-existent. There was no Stony Brook. There was no, to go to the grocery store, we had to go to Smithtown. But when we moved out here, all you could hear at night was the crickets, and there were no lights on the street. It was very, very dark. You'd hear crickets and the birds in the morning. And then they started building Nichols Road. When I moved out here in '69, my family from Minnesota came out to visit me. My mother thought, and you would think that I'm from St. Paul, Minnesota, that would be the sticks. My mother thought I'd moved to the country. She couldn't believe how there was nothing out here. No traffic lights, no street lights, no nothing. Nothing but the crickets. So she thought I'd moved to the sticks, not to the city. So when they came back years later, she couldn't believe how developed it had become. The people that have moved in our area are lovely people. They're from all over the world. We have a mosque up in Selden. We have Catholic churches. We have any kind of church you want, Presbyterian, Methodist, Baptist. So as far as opportunities in that respect, it's interesting. Now I have dear friends that are from Pakistan, and I have enjoyed their culture and their children. 4 of them stayed with me while the wife was having a baby, and they would get up in the middle of the night and put their little rugs on my living room floor and pray. And that's wonderful. And it was nice for my kids to see. So as far as the people, I think the people are tremendous. Centereach is a culturally diverse area, which is nice.
I never had a permanent ship. I sailed on about 70 different ships over 25 years. Mostly, I worked myself up as quickly a cadet, then third engineer, second engineer, and I spent most of my career as a first assistant engineer. At the end of my career, for the last couple of years, I was chief engineer. Sailed extensively across the Atlantic Ocean. I went quite a few times into the Mediterranean, sometimes up at the North Sea over the top. I've been through the Panama Canal a dozen, maybe 2 dozen times, down both sides of South America, Africa, around the Horn, up to Kenya, back down around through the Suez Canal. I circumnavigated the earth, went through the Suez around to Guam, and they flew me back home from Guam as I finished my tour there. So if I'm a little slow, I guess I'm a day behind everybody because I went around the wrong way. When I started my career, my first ship as a cadet engineer was supposedly going to Vietnam, loaded up with bombs from Sunny Point, North Carolina. And as we got through Panama, we got orders to take it to Guam. So we never got to Vietnam on that run. We went to Guam, unloaded the bombs, came back through Panama, Beaumont, Texas. Again, it was the same kind of thing. We loaded up the ship with a bunch of vehicles, tanks, trucks, jeeps, and we took that up the Saigon River. So I spent about 3 weeks in Saigon in 1969. Back to Beaumont, Texas, and did 6 months on that ship and got off. So those are basically the 2 wars I was in.
I lived on Long Island all my life up until I was about 33, then I moved to Maine, and we lived in a log cabin back in the woods with no electricity, and that was a very interesting part of my life. It was very hard. We heated by wood only, which meant 90% of your whole year was taken up with wood. You had to have wood and gardening. We would be chopping trees down in the summer, cutting them up in logs. In the fall, we'd be splitting them, and then we'd have to stack them. And I always kept a cord of wood stacked in the house near the wood stove, and my whole porch, I should have brought that picture, My whole porch was stacked with about 15 to 18 cords of wood. And that would start in the fall in October, and hopefully that wood was going to last through the winter. It was such a beautiful, peaceful life. You guys just can't imagine what it is to be able to sit there by kerosene lamp and just read a book. Just read a book. No television, no iPad, no computers, no cell phones, nothing. Just you and the quiet and a book. That is so beautiful. If you can read a novel like that, you can get into that story, and it's better than any motion picture you could ever see on television or in the movies. It was just really a great life.
So Uncle Sam came knocking on my door. Not really, they send you a postcard because it was draft time, okay? We had a draft, of course, for young people. At that time, men. And they needed people in the military. And they said, report to such and such a street in Manhattan on such and such a date to get ready to go into the Army. I said, oh, no, I want no part of the Army. So I went down to Huntington, and then I knocked on their door, and I went to the naval recruiter. There was a chief. That's a rank in the Navy and the Coast Guard. The chief, he gets up behind the desk. I'm serious as I'm sitting here. He gets up from behind the desk, and he comes around. I'm standing there, of course, in front of the desk. He comes up, puts his arm around my shoulder, and he says, son, we'll take care of you. And they sure enough did. So here we are online at the graduation date from the school, which is on I think it was the 1st of December, 66. So the instructor says, okay, everybody line up alphabetically. And so there were two guys with P's in front of me. So he calls out, and there was this one kid named Terry Putty. I'll remember, he was from Chicago. And he says, all right, Putty, here's your assignment. You're going to Adak, Alaska. Oh my goodness, where is that? He says Adak, Alaska, which is a tiny little island out in the middle of the Pacific, northern Pacific, on these Aleutian Islands. It's called isolation duty. Nobody wants to go there. So, because there's nothing happening there. There's no animals, there's no vegetation to speak of. It's just a small little base, a cryptologic base. And the next guy, he gets assigned to the Philippines. And I didn't want to go there either. Well, lo and behold, Redding, we are sending you to Naval Communications Station, Honolulu. And I was like, whoa, I'm going to Hawaii. And that's what they did. They sent me to Hawaii. And I reported there on the 28th of December, 1966. The Liberty in Hawaii was great. Played a lot of golf and went and spent a lot of time on the beach.
Well, Centereach had a dirt road. We had no electricity. The only thing that came through was Dugan's Bakery. They came through twice a week, and they sold bread and pies and cookies and stuff like that. Centereach only had a couple of buildings in it. We had an ice box, and we used to go to the ice dock about every other day, and we buy a quarter piece of ice, and we bring it back and put it in the refrigerator. We had a pan underneath the refrigerator to get the water, and then every day you would bend down and pull the bucket out and throw it out to the outside. Well, you got a big block of ice for 25 cents. You had 15 cents, 10 cents, and 25 cents, and it had all the way up to $1, but you couldn't put that amount into the refrigerator. It was too big. You roughed it, You had kerosene lamps, and you had a pump to pump water, and you had an outhouse. And it was my job to clean out a house every week. But what we used to do, we used to throw lime down into the hole, and after a while, at the end of the week, like either Saturday or Sunday, I'd clean it out. and it stunk. And everything was farms. Everything around was farms. Nothing in Selden for farms. Also, nothing in Centereach. Selden had all the farms, and there was no from where we lived. There was a farm, and we used to after they picked up all the vegetables and stuff, whatever was left over, we used to go over and pick it up, like potatoes and carrots, and bring it home to the house. And there was no traffic lights. There was no traffic lights from Westbury to Huntington. There was one, and from Huntington to 111, you had another traffic light. That was it. Three traffic lights. My first car was the 1939 Plymouth. I used that for about 3 or 4 months, and I bought a new Pontiac. Cost me $1,800 for a brand new Pontiac.
What year?
1953. 1953. $1,800. Now you have to buy a tire for that amount.
What did I do in the Navy?
Yeah.
I was a baker, was in commissary for 4 years. I served in the Navy for 4 years during the Korean conflict. And after I was discharged, I came home. My wife and I got married, and after that, we moved to Centereach. In 1959, we moved to Centereach. A lot of things have changed since I moved to Centereach. There were a lot less people living here. Nichols Road was even in existence at that time. Middle Country Road was a 2-lane highway. Stony Brook University was just on the map, thinking about building it in the hospital. And as I said, many things have changed. I bought my house here for $13,200, which I still live in. My mortgage was $84 a month, but I was only making $64 a week at that time. But we made it. We used to go to Patchogue to do our main shopping. There wasn't too many stores around here, so we had to go to Patchogue to do most of our shopping. It changed for the best. Brookhaven is a wonderful, town to live in. The people are all very nice. I live in Eastwood Village, and I lived here. Well, I've been here 63 years, so I have seen a lot of changes. Some not for the better, like our roads today. I don't know what's going on, but basically speaking, as I said, Brookhaven is a wonderful community to live in.
I put in for duty, and the Vietnam War was going, and so I went to Nakhon Phanom Air Base, Royal Thai Air Base. It was very northeastern Thailand. We were 7 miles from Mekong River, and if you went due east, we were 60 miles from North Vietnam. We were further north than the DMZ. And our job was to rescue pilots. If pilots got shot up on bombing missions, didn't matter what branch of the service, they were to hightail it into Laos, and we put up planes and helicopters to try and pluck them out of the jungle. And it was busy. It was always busy. And the shifts were like 12, 14 hours, 6 days a week. But it made the time fly. You just went through a lot of time. I was taking college courses wherever I was. And that, something else to keep you going, something else I've got 6 weeks of college. And at the end of 6 weeks was gone, and it went fast. And to my surprise, I get called into the captain's office one day, me and this other young fella. And neither of us have 3 years in yet, so we think we're in all kinds of crazy trouble. We had this captain who everybody thought he was out of his mind, and so you really never wanted to see him. If you could stay away from him, you did. And, he calls us in and tells us both we've been promoted to staff sergeant, which was, we were going to have our fourth strike before we were in 3 years, each of us, which was at that time almost unheard of. So they were working hard to see if both of us wanted to re-enlist. And I knew that 4 years was going to be it for me. I mean, I enjoyed the time. I saw places that you'd never see. I mean, places in Korea, Japan, the Philippines, Bangkok, Thailand. I mean, just places that you just don't get to go to, you know, yourself. And when the time was up, it was almost like the guys I worked with was almost like leaving my family again. It was almost like saying goodbye, because no matter how much you say you're going to meet them and see them again, everybody's just. A few of them made it to my wedding the following November, which was pretty cool. And then we found out that one of them who made the wedding was killed in action. And that was very, very tough. That was tough. Even now it's tough. But his sister sent me a letter about 6 months later. We found your address with some pictures. And we just wanted to tell you that, you know, we feel that it was nice that you and our brother were together, and it was cool, but it was like heartbreaking a second time. But that was a very good 4 years.
I was on the 89th floor of the North Tower, which is Tower 1, and the plane was supposedly. The impact area was between the 94th and the 98th floor. And the plane came in sort of on an angle, like this, not this way. The South Tower was this way. That cut that tower, you know, badly, almost in half. That's why it came down first. My tower lasted, as they said, 102 minutes. I was there 8 o'clock in the morning, which I was coming early. And somewhere around 8:30, I guess it was. The plane hit the upper level of the building, and it was a loud explosion. The alarms were going off like crazy. Boo, boo. You know. And I was sitting in the conference room with no windows available, and I got thrown up against the wall because the chair had rollers on it, because the building was going this way. I looked when I got out on the office working area. I could see out the window that the sparks were coming down from up above. I said to myself, well, that's a good sign. I don't know exactly what happened, because we used to see the small planes fly by, never realizing it was a passenger jet that hit the building. The radio, we had turned it on. They didn't, the announcers didn't realize it either. Just simply saying a plane hit the building. So the end result is that my boss had just come into the office when the plane hit. He got off the elevator, was holding onto the door. He came in. And we stood there for a while. The ceiling panels all came down, and he said he was going to go out, to see if he can, see what's going on out there with the doors and the stairwell. So he wrapped his head in. Somebody had a sweatshirt in there or something. He wrapped it around his face. I see the smoke coming out under the door. Now, this was the first time I had to admit I was scared. I didn't want to go out there. I'm glad he didn't ask me to go with him. I was worried about him going out. But he did. He went out, came back in, and he made the statement, well, we're going to wait here for help to come. And I said, why aren't we leaving? Let's get the heck out of here. So it stayed that way. So I guess it was, by the time we started in the stairwell, it must have been about maybe 9:30, something like that. The stairwell was open at this stage, and we started going down. I'm about 99% certain we were the last ones in the building, because above us was decimated with the airplane having hit up there. And there was nobody that I could hear on the stairwells coming down with us. We were it. And there was our little group. We were in the stairwell when apparently the South Tower came down, because our building shook as a result of the South Tower next to us, coming down. And one of the things that my boss Walter did, which was probably saved us, is he was stopped when we were getting ready to go back into the stairwell at a different level to continue. And a policeman was there. And he had simply said to Walter, you have to wait here because the firemen are coming up. And Walter said, thank God, we're not going to wait. And then we continued down. By the time I got into the main grand concourse outside the building, I couldn't see the South Tower. Everything was just gray haze from all the cement and the concrete that was pulverized when the buildings came down. And I didn't fully comprehend that the building completely collapsed. I thought, if anything, when our building came down, I thought just the top came down. Now, we got out of the building with 5 minutes to spare before it came down. I had to run down Vesey Street. I had to make a beeline on a side street and then get out from the plume that came down. We went from daytime to nighttime. I never forgot that. You could not see anything till that plume went past. And again, I'm not recognizing that the building came down. I'm thinking the top must have come off. And I'm standing there on the curb at Penn Station waiting for it to open. And I'm sitting with some guy there, and I said, I wonder how long it's going to take to fix the building. And he said to me, fix the building? He said, the building's gone. Now I hear a car radio, you know, and they're confirming, of course, the building imploded. I go, oh, well. And the first train out from when it opened up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon was the Ronkonkoma, which is my train. And that was the gist. I got on the train and I got home. I'm covered with all the ash from walking in it and so forth. And my wife greeted me at the front door. So that's when a lot of it hit me. You know, I just went to my knees. I dragged her down with me. We're both now, you know, crying, you know, because I was just so glad I was out, you know, and I could have been dead.
Well, when we first moved out, and moved into a house, we didn't have a refrigerator, so we put our food outside, and then the foxes came and broke into the container and ate the butter and whatever was else in there. That was before we got our refrigerator. I would like to know what do you think now as a teenage about your future, especially the girls, because at the time I was a teacher, all I wanted to do was meet the man of my dreams that I could live with all my life. Do they think about that now?
I don't know.
I don't know. What do you think? Do you think about that you'd like to marry someday? No, that's the first thing for your mind? Oh, okay.
Yeah, no.
Because when I was 13, I would have parties and we'd have spin the bottle. You know what that is? Or we'd have post office. You remember? Did you ever play post office? No. Well, post office, we had a little vestibule in. Are we on camera? Are we on speaking? Oh, is this okay? Is this appropriate?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. But we had a little vestibule, and we used to. When I had my, when I was 13, your age, I had a party, and all my schoolmates came over, and we played spin the bottle and post office.
Kissing games.
And other games, but it was fun. We were proper. I think we were proper. We went about as far as we could go. That was it. Yeah. Those days, when your friends, you didn't have like one boyfriend or one girlfriend. You had a lot of friends, and when I first met my husband, I didn't like him, but everybody liked him, but I didn't like him. So when I graduated from high school, I got a job at Pan American World Airways in LaGuardia, and I worked for them, and so that's how my traveling came about. And so I was planning a trip to Rio de Janeiro, and I was going, but I was afraid to go because my husband had been, he wasn't my husband then, but he was drafted, and by the time I got back from Rio, he was already in California, and then he finally went to Korea. And that's when I really got to know him, because we started writing, and we were writing for 2 years while he was away. He was right on the front lines in Korea, and he was very lucky to get back in one piece, so to speak. And when he came back, and I was working in the city at that time at American Motors, and I was going to, he said, I'll meet you tonight at your house, and I said, no, I'll come to your house. So I went from Jamaica to Ridgewood, and then when I got, did you ever hear of the houses called Coldwater Flats? You had a long hallway going in, and then when you went in, you were in the dining room, and then they had the kitchen, and then they had 3 bedrooms all in a row. And so after not seeing my husband for 2 years, at the time he wasn't my husband, let me make that clear. And so I'm walking into the hallway, and I just, did your body ever freeze that you couldn't move? I couldn't move. I don't know why. And then he came out into the hallway and met me, and he was, then it was okay. I felt safe. I knew he was the one, and that was it. So that year when he came back home from Korea, we got engaged, and then we got married the following year. And he's been a wonderful man. He's still a wonderful man. He was a handsome man. He's not as handsome now, but, you know, age does things to you. But, you know, we've had a beautiful life together. I've been we've had some sadness. Everybody has some sadness, you know. And, but that's life. Life, you have to deal with the good and the bad. And I hope you have as good a life as I've had. It's been beautiful.